Nelson Peltz. You might be familiar with him, and if you're Bob Iger, then you're almost certainly familiar with him. He is an activist investor who's been trying to buy up. Well, he has in fact bought up huge amounts of Disney stock over the past year or so, and he was really doing the rounds back at the start of the year because he was interested in getting a board seat on the Disney board because he felt that the company was heading in a bad direction, creatively, financially, for sure, under Bob Iger. And they were able to quieten him down to some extent because essentially Iger acquiesced to all of the things that he wanted. He wanted the mass firings that Bob Chapek had already begun, and he got it pretty much. But he bided his time to see how things panned out. And as things have collapsed over the past several months, he's begun to make his presence known again. And now he doesn't just own $1 billion of shares. He's increased that to $2.5 billion. And he is now gunning for not just one seat on the board, but multiple seats, with the view of potentially trying to unseat Bob Iger as CEO of Disney. And it's gathering a bit of momentum now. And it's kind of an interesting situation because, damn, one, you're trying to wrestle control of a sinking ship, but two, can you even unseat Bob Iger at this point? Or is he just like part of the Disney fabric now because he's been in it for so long?
I wouldn't have thought even ousting Bob Iger would be the ultimate goal. Because didn't he call off the original round of sort of aggressive share buying that they did back in February, I think it was called off when Bob Iger was announced as returning, and then obviously the layoff strategy was announced as well. And then he thought for a time, yeah, that's okay then. But since the stock price continues to go down and everything seems to be moving in the wrong direction, what he's doing is upping the amount of shares the company, I think Trian is his company, owns, and in return for a seat on the board. But that would be, I would assume, to try and influence Iger as opposed to remove Iger. But I don't know a huge amount about it.
When he did this initially, because Bob Iger was the CEO when he made his initial bid, because he did it under the banner of Restore the Magic. He made it clear back then, like, I'm not trying to unseat Bob Iger. That's not my goal. It's just purely to get a board seat and have a seat at the table, essentially, to have conversations about what we can do to fix this company. He hasn't made that same declaration this time. He hasn't assured people that he's not trying to get rid of Iger, which is kind of like, it's almost like by omission, it's like, well, he's tacitly saying, I want this guy out, which is an interesting approach, but I don't blame him because Iger just seems to be making things worse with everything that he does, and he's just kind of out of ideas at this point. And probably he's too fucking old, and he's been in it for too long, and he's just burned out with this, and he's no longer capable of doing anything good. And so I don't blame this guy for trying to unseat him and get someone else in to replace him.
Nelson Peltz sounds like a goofy but lovable high schooler in a 1980s drama comedy.
Mm-hmm.
He might do, and it might be a goofy name, but this is a man with a proven track record of essentially doing what he's doing here, mounting not quite hostile takeovers, but basically being an activist investor, getting involved in the boards of various companies that are struggling and then turning them around. Now, he hasn't previously had a huge amount of investment in entertainment. It's been energy companies, that sort of thing, that he's worked on before, which is why he'd struggled to gain traction at the start of the year. But now he's more than doubled his share stake in Disney. So he has much more influence than he had before. And there's a real potential now for him to actually do this. And he seems to share the opinion that essentially that we've given on our various channels, you know, that Disney's gotten too involved in politics, like political battles that they can't hope to win. The quality of their products is suffering greatly, and it's tarnishing their brand. And they're also overextended into far too many different studios. They've gone way beyond their animation studio roots to the point where they're just on everything and they can't sustain it. And so there's a lot of, I guess there's a lot of merit to his perspective on this. I just have no clue if he's got any chance of success.
I don't either, but from Puck News. It's people who used to work with Deadline and Hollywood Reporters behind a paywall, but it's my job, so I subscribe to it for now. Wrote a whole article on this. I'll just read you the last paragraph. So earlier this year, fending off Peltz's proxy fight was a nuisance. This time around, it could end up derailing the whole Disney enterprise. In my estimation, Iger has two choices: either concede to Peltz, give him his board seats, and take his advice, or resign and turn over the job to a successor who has the willingness to think about Disney in a whole new way. And he's definitely not doing the latter.
Do you think he regrets not staying out instead of doing the drop out, come back out, back in thing?
He never really dropped out. Like, he was like essentially hovering over Bob Chapek.
He kept his old office, didn't he? Like the really big grand office that was his. He didn't let Chapek have it. He kept it himself.
And he wasn't even out of the company. Like, it was in some kind of like supervisor advisory
He was chairman of the
role.
board for
in
the
that
first
case.
year.
Like,
Yes.
do you think maybe he's thinking about that should have been legitimately my out?
Yeah.
Because
He should have left then.
it was a
'cause I
good
think
time to leave.
He would have maintained a pretty good legacy. You know, the guy who oversaw Disney's expansion into like the acquisition of Marvel, Pixar, Lucasfilm, all these things. You know, some were more successful than others, but whatever. Like, he got the company to new heights, and then he turned it over to his successor to try and make a go of it. And you could easily say Chapek fucked it up. Ironically, Chapek took their share value to the highest point it's ever been, and actually was starting to address some of the problems, like firing people who were just clearly not doing their jobs anymore, and like trimming the fat. And he never got a chance to do it. And
No, I don't think Bob Iger's ego would allow him to retire. Sure, he wanted to, but like, this guy has a massive, massive ego. And I mean, he bailed out right before the coup. And you don't think he had somebody whispering in his ear from Washington, like, this thing is coming, we're going to shut down everybody? Because there were whispers going around already. It wasn't some last minute thing. They were preparing for this stuff. And he probably got some inside knowledge and said, this is a good time to bail, and I could come back and be the savior. And now he gets to lord over his own disasters, the disasters of his making. And I call that justice. I call it justice.
The ego thing is a powerful one, though. He's effectively the dictator of a very small country, but with actually quite a medium-sized country. Dictators in charge of countries don't usually step away and let it go. Well, they try, and then they get bored, and they come back and say, well, I want to control from behind the scenes, or I want to be back in charge. Let me have at it, please. Problem is, his anointed successor in Chapek actually bounced himself into a lot of the trouble that Disney's in legally at the moment. Purely through just complete stupidity and idiocy. The whole parental rights education thing, Disney hadn't come out against it, was criticized by some people for not coming out against it. So Chapek went out and said, oh no, we were very against it, trust us. And then lo and behold, starts this entire legal battle with Ron DeSantis and loses a huge amount of Disney's core audience. That was just cowardice and stupidity, but that's the person that Iger left in charge. So to the extent he's picking up a mess, he is also picking up a mess of his own making. He made the wrong decision.
Oh, Chapek definitely made it worse. Remember, his first statement was, we want to stay out of politics, which was the right thing to do.
Oh, yes.
And
if he honestly, he would have taken a lot of heat from the activists within the company and probably a few people in the media, but if he had just stuck to that line, he would have saved himself so much grief.
Unless he was just there to be the fall guy, and Chapek's kicking it on some Caribbean island.
It has been proven that if you stand up to the activists, you can win. Like with the Hogwarts Legacy supposed boycott, that turned out to be rubbish. And with Netflix, they wanted to get rid of Dave Chappelle, but the management just said, no, if we have these particular values, and it's up to you to measure up to them. And if that's not for you, then you might want to try somewhere else. So you can stand up to the activists, and it's been proven through precedent that you can endure it.
Yeah. I think it's difficult when you're a new CEO to a massive company like Disney and your predecessor is chairman of the board and essentially like looming over your shoulder. I imagine that's a pretty tricky situation to be in because you don't have full control over everything and you don't have full power to do all this stuff.
Wouldn't let Chapek have his office? But
I mean, that's just
because of the shower.
That is petty.
It's so petty, dude.
Do you think he handed over the key to the executive washroom, or did he keep that as well?
He probably kept that as well.
I think so. It's like surely a company as massive as that, like, okay, I can just pay to have a shower installed in my office too. It'll be fine. Unbelievable. Yeah,
No,
like
it
that's
was just,
how
I want
mundane
his
these
shower.
people are.
You can't have my shower. Of course, I have enough milk. It's a dominance thing. It's weird.
That is how mundane these people are. But
Yes.
man, yeah, it's just a crappy. It's a crappy position to be in now, to have almost been out and then to come back in thinking that you're going to be the savior, and you're essentially overseeing the demise of your own company and everything that you've built. Like, your legacy is just slowly getting eroded day by day.
And the rats are fleeing the sinking ship. The Access media is turning on, and they're being critical of Marvel films. And now we're hearing rumors of departments. You know, well, the head of Pixar came out and basically said, yeah, we've kind of lost our way. Yeah, Disney has lost its way. All its subsidiaries have lost its way. Getting rid of John Lasseter was dumb. That killed Pixar overnight. And it was over what? He hugged people, you know.
But
so
the
now he's going to
trifecta
Netflix.
of Pixar, Marvel, and Lucasfilm, the trifecta of everything going downhill. And even within Lucasfilm, the Star Wars part and the Indiana Jones part, like everything.
Don't get their
going
live
downhill.
action stuff then as well.
I mean, it's, in 2015, 2016, they must have just been laughing their asses off. Like, you know, we've had a massively successful Star Wars movie. Like, Star Wars is back, baby. Marvel is going strong. Pixar is going strong. Like, everything that we've bought over is just doing great. It's an awesome time to be at Disney. And then you know, since about 2017, 2018, it's just been a decline. And then now everything is just in free fall. Like, if I was put in charge of Disney right now, I would just quit immediately and be like, no, I'm not doing this.
Well,
I don't even know what
having
I'm doing.
The Lion King and it, like, live action quote unquote movie and Endgame out in the same year. Those two made shit tons of money. So they must have felt okay as well at that point, right? Like, drunk on power a little bit.
Yep. And then you obviously could have made up for the shortfalls or the decline of the Star Wars movies with the fact that the MCU was still going strong, but now you don't have that either. And it just feels like everything that they put out just seems to be failing. They're kind of stumbling from one failure to another.